Hello, I'm Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Today, what's next for Wikileaks? We speak to its founder, Julian Assange, about the future of online whistleblowing. Our digital producer Malika Bilal is here fielding all of your comments and questions specifically for Julian Assange. How's that going, Malika?
Well, we got hundreds of them, comments and questions online via Twitter using the hashtag AskJulian once we solicited it. And some of the people that tweeted in with the hashtag are going to be in our Google Plus Hangout today. We'll be talking to some a little bit later in the show. But of course, for all of you at home, we want to hear from all of you as well. So if you want to join this conversation, make sure you use the hashtag AJStream.
Now, as the trial of US Army Private Bradley Manning is set to begin next week, and many questions loom over the future of the whistleblowing website Wikileaks. Manning has admitted to providing the website with the largest ever leak of classified documents, but denies the US government's charge of, and I'm going to quote here, aiding the enemy, end of quote. The ruling in this case could affect government whistleblowers and the journalists they contact. So to discuss this issue and so much more with us is Wikileaks founder Julian Assange. He is joining us from the Ecuadorian embassy in London, where he's been living for almost a year to avoid extradition to Sweden. And in New York, we have Julian's attorney, Michael Ratner of the Center for Constitutional Rights. Michael and Julian, it's good to have you both in the stream. Julian, let's get cracking on this Manning trial straight away. You are part of a lawsuit pushing for the US Department of Defense for greater transparency with the Manning trial. What is it that you actually want them to do that they're not doing right now?
Look, justice must be seen to be done. That's a basic principle of open justice, is that the judge, whilst trying, must themselves be tried. And if courts are not open, then all sorts of abuses follow. We know that from a long history of secret star chambers in almost every country in the world. In the Bradley Manning proceedings, the prosecution plans to call 141 witnesses, 31 of which will have their testimony wholly or completely secret, withheld from the public. Even the judgments in the court, some tens of thousands of judgments that have been previously made have been kept secret at various times. So in order for there to be justice, there must be public oversight. This is a matter of international diplomatic significance. It involves every country on the earth. It's a matter that it concerns US citizens, the nature of the state. It concerns over 109,000 deaths in Iraq that WikiLeaks revealed from this information, and over 20,000 deaths in Afghanistan. The stakes could not be higher. They include this young man, Bradley Manning's life. He is charged under a capital offence. If he's not sentenced to death, then at least life imprisonment. Flowing from that, it concerns whether a precedent will be set which criminalises the press in general.
Right.
That's a bold new ambit claim that the Pentagon is trying to make, that speaking to a journalist is the same as speaking to a publication, which is the same as speaking to the public, which is the same as speaking to Al-Qaeda, which is the same as speaking to an enemy of the United States, which is a death penalty, both for government informants inside government, but potentially also for journalists embroiled in under the Espionage Act. A very, very serious business, and it must be public.
So, Julian, do you feel a little bit like you may be poking a sleeping lion? Because the US Department of Defense, they're already very interested in talking to you, and here you are being part of a lawsuit to ask them for greater transparency. Are you mischief making, perhaps, or what is the response you're getting so far?
How much of the mischief is ours, and how
Right.
much is the Center for Constitutional Rights? But no, this is a matter of justice seeking, and the pursuit of justice should not be seen as mischief. It is true that we had a titanic battle with the Pentagon in 2010, 2011, and ongoing now, the results of that. The Pentagon publicly declared before the world in a 40-minute press conference that we must destroy all publications that we had made relating to the Pentagon, destroy all upcoming publications, and cease dealing with US military whistleblowers. It conclusively lost that fight in all 3 points. We were victorious. All our publications are still before the public. We published all the material that we were going to publish, and the organization, despite extensive legal attacks in different countries, banking blockades, people being turned into informers, compelled to testify. Perhaps Alexa O'Brien would later speak about the scale of what the US government calls a whole-of-government investigation. But this is simply another maneuver by this organization and its friends in the Center for Constitutional Rights to try and gain some justice for our alleged sources.
Well, you mentioned Alexa's name, and I want to get to her in just a second, but we're talking about whistleblowers, and our community is talking about whether or not Bradley Manning is one. There's disagreement online. Anika says the U.S. Department of Defense has very strict legal definition for whistleblowers versus leakers. By their definition, he's a leaker and not protected by law. On the other hand, Fozia writes in, Bradley Manning is a whistleblower. His trial is publicity. She basically calls it a stunt, trying to make an example of him to warn others not to tell the truth. With that, I want to go to our Google Plus Hangout and talk to Alexa O'Brien, who was just referenced. Alexa is an independent journalist speaking to us from New York. Go ahead, Alexa.
Hi. So my question is military prosecutors appear to be attempting to thwart a whistleblower defense by Manning by alleging a conspiracy. For example, they're holding fast to a November 1st, 2009 time frame in regards to the alleged communication of a video of the Guarani massacre, which took place in May 4th, 2009 in the Farah province of Afghanistan. WikiLeaks has never published such a video. The Guarani airstrike is the only charge under the Espionage Act that Manning did not plead to lesser included offenses. He pled not guilty to. This alleged conspiracy also goes to the wanton publication charge. Is WikiLeaks prepared for this summer's onslaught of allegations by military prosecutors at Fort Meade?
Well, the next 12 weeks are going to be very interesting. Not just in relation to the trial of Bradley Manning or precedents that are set in relation to US media in general, but of course WikiLeaks' previous activity in the pre-trial proceedings show the US prosecution floating certain balloons in relation to their claims about WikiLeaks, mentioning that the founders and manager of WikiLeaks are involved in the grand jury investigation, claiming that that they have evidence of chat logs between Bradley Manning and I, and so on. So it will be very interesting to see what comes out. I am prepared insofar as I am formally recognized as a political refugee. There is no hope at the moment for the US government to get at me, thanks to the support of the Ecuadorian people. We also have strong supporters in the United States, like the Center for Constitutional Rights and others. This is going to be a clash of the titans in the courts and in the media, who will attempt to frame it in all sorts of ways. It is normal that the prosecution is at least initially successful in setting the frame because they get to go first. It's a very political matter. We can see that as a result of the 141 prosecution witnesses that they are bringing. The allegation is that this young military analyst communicated with me and with WikiLeaks in order to bring this information before the world. There's no allegation that he acted for reasons of espionage, that he acted out of revenge, that he acted for money. The only allegation is that he communicated this information to the press. He says, and it has not been refuted by the prosecution, that he acted to draw these war crimes and other unethical conduct to the public. But
Julian,
there's going to be a big fight over the framing, what happened. And that's why they've brought in 141 witnesses who weren't there. None of these people were there. They were not in the room with Bradley Manning. They were not in WikiLeaks headquarters or with any of our people. So you can see that the efforts being designed to set the frame, and very strong media control also. And Alexa perhaps can talk about how strong the controlling influence is of the media attempting to get into the court proceedings or report on the court proceedings.
Julian, I'm going to move on because we have so many questions from our online audience that they want to put to you. For instance, you have a very complicated legal life. You talked about the being part of the suit against the US Department of Defense. You talked also about the US government being interested in you. You're under political asylum right now in the Ecuadorian embassy, but also a lot of questions are coming up about the allegations and the Swedish police wanting to talk to you. Can you get us up to date with that situation?
Well, let's try and pull back for a moment and frame what is happening, because it's quite easy to get bogged down into one little piece of detail or another. WikiLeaks has something like a dozen court cases running concurrently. If we split them up, there are court cases surrounding the criminal pursuit of WikiLeaks, me and its sources in the United States. That has spilled over into other countries. For instance, the US secretly sent a private jet with 6 FBI officers and 2 prosecutors into Iceland undercover. They were eventually discovered by the Icelandic government and kicked out. So that's one group. Another group is the banking blockade, where the various banking organizations, Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, etc., have erected against WikiLeaks a blockade like they have erected against Cuba. But in this case, based upon no law, no administrative law, no US law, just political pressure on these big banking organizations.
Right, so I understand that there are more...
And then there's also
Julian, I understand that there are...
asylum issues
right.
That I am under.
So I do understand that there are a lot of things going on with WikiLeaks, because there are a lot of secrets that you have and you're sharing with the world. It was a very, and you wanted to frame that in some kind of context. But just very briefly, just get us up to date with the Swedish police being interested in talking to you, and then we move on, just very swiftly.
Yeah, well, the Swedish police are not interested in talking to me, and that is precisely the problem. These allegations, there has never been any charges against me, which everyone should read about. I can't go into all the detail here, but if you go to justiceforassange.com, numeral 4, justiceforassange.com, you can read all about them. But the Swedish police investigated this matter, dismissed it. The chief prosecutor of Stockholm, Eva Finney, interestingly, who has just been appointed to investigate the Swedish race riots. She is the most respected prosecutor in Sweden. But politician Claes Borgström, then after the matter was dropped, took it to the city of Gothenburg and another prosecutor 1 month before the Swedish national election, and brought it back up in the height of the attack against WikiLeaks. So already highly politicized.
Right.
But they refuse to come to the United Kingdom to speak to me. They refuse to take a statement. They refuse to speak on the telephone. They refuse to use all the normal EU and Swedish policy to speak to me, to take my statement, etc. And they also refuse to explain why they will not do that. They also refuse, if I say, okay, well then I will go to Sweden. If you refuse to behave normally, to clear this up, I will go to Sweden. All I ask for, and all my lawyers ask for, and all the Ecuadorian government at a formal state level asks for, is that you give a guarantee that I will not be extradited to the United States. The Swedish government also refuses to do that, and as a consequence, we're at this impasse. The British government is in violation of international law. A state has declared me a political refugee. The UK is part of the UN system for refugees. Ecuador is part of the UN system for refugees. The international law is clear. Under such circumstances, the agreements with the United Nations take precedence to allegations where there's not even a charge.
Okay, Malika.
Our Google Plus Hangout is dying to get back in here, so I'm going to go straight to Saptarshi Ghosh, who is one of our community members, and he's speaking to us from Wisconsin. Go ahead with your question.
Hi, Mr. Assange. Thanks for taking our questions. In the past, WikiLeaks has used discretion in terms of the timing and the content of its leaks. I was wondering why you think it's appropriate for an organization like WikiLeaks or someone like yourself to make those decisions as opposed to someone else or a different entity. So my basic question is, who is WikiLeaks accountable to?
Well, WikiLeaks has the best record in the business. There's no allegation that we have published even a single falsely described document, not one in our entire history. Compare that, say, to the New York Times with front page stories, bogus stories about weapons of mass destruction, other fictitious stories presented every day. So we have the best record. Also, of protecting sources. There's no allegation that WikiLeaks has, through any inaction or action, exposed even a single one of its sources. There's allegations that some sources alleged to be, for example, Bradley Manning, spoke to other parties, other researchers or journalists working for US publications were exposed that way, but not through us. We make a simple public statement, unlike most other media organizations, of precisely what we will publish and what we won't, and we always carry that out. We will publish material that is of diplomatic, political, ethical, or historical significance that is under the threat of censorship that has not been published before. That's very, very simple. We operate in the same manner that lawyers do when representing people to the court. We represent whistleblowers to the court of public opinion. That's what we do. When we're under resource constraints as a result of banking blockade, of course, we have to prioritize our cases, just like lawyers have limited amount of time and have to prioritize the people they represent. So in that case, we prioritize according to greatest need and greatest impact.
Well, Julian, there's a follow-up here on Facebook, on the lines of that and who you're accountable for. Edwin says, did you consider the possibility that certain published documents would put other people's lives in jeopardy? And then even following up on that, just giving it to you double, Brian says, dear sir, in a general sense, do you believe that there are any government communications that are too sensitive for public disclosure?
Well, look, we don't need to speculate about hypotheticals. We have a 6-year publishing record for every country in the world. During that time, there has not been a single allegation by any government in the world, not one government in the world, not the Pentagon, that WikiLeaks has caused the loss of life to even a single person, not one. And if we want to talk about speculative harm, this issue arose, of course, when we published the Afghan War Diaries, and a very serious matter, very serious politically, where we revealed 20,000 deaths in Afghanistan, the circumstances and details of each one of those deaths. Of course, the Pentagon and its cronies and the countries in ISAF all drew upon their influence to try and distract, to try and make some kind of counterattack against the organization, to distract from the very real suffering and death that was being caused in Afghanistan. So how did they do that? I mean, it's kindergarten rhetoric. How did they do it? We said, look, this war in Afghanistan has caused the deaths of 20,000 people. Here are the documents. Here's what happened. The original US assassination lists were released in that material. We showed examples of how the United States government had killed 7 children with one of these assassinations with the HIMARS strike, and not killed any people from the Taliban or Al-Qaeda, just 7 children. So what was the response? Basic kindergarten rhetoric, to say exactly the same thing back to us. We say you're wading knee deep in the blood of 20,000 people. The response from that is that WikiLeaks might have blood on its hands. My God, I mean, it is so pathetic. It is so obvious. It is so trivial. But in fact, if we want to talk about speculation, all that speculation, that absurd, insane speculation that occurred during that time, whipped up by complicit, unconscionable establishment media from ISAF countries. Well, let's look what is actually said. NATO in Kabul told CNN that they could not find a single person, not one, they could not see a single person in our publication that needed to be protected. Not one.
Julian, take a breath for a moment, have a pause, take a sip of water. I want to go to your lawyer, Michael Ratner. Michael, you have so many things going on with Julian. Is he the worst legal client ever? Are you tearing your hair out trying to represent him?
No, Julian's a wonderful legal client. I love what WikiLeaks does. I think Julian has been remarkable. What upsets me, even in this last questions to Julian, is people talk about, well, you're not accountable, but the question is, now that all of this has been revealed by WikiLeaks, from the killings in Afghanistan to the ones in Iraq, to the collateral murder video, to the secret wars in Yemen, where's the accountability of the people who engaged in those crimes? What we should be focusing on is getting to the bottom and getting accountability for those crimes. I'm not worried at all about WikiLeaks. They're actually doing what they should be doing, publishing the criminality and hypocrisy of governments all over the world. Our job is to now hold those governments accountable. Julian is in a bad situation in the sense that my government, this government in the United States, will do anything they can to get their hands on him. And the problem we're faced with is that if he leaves that embassy and goes to Sweden without a guarantee that he won't be sent to the United States, he will be in the United States in very rapid time. He will be put into one of those underground prisons we have,
right.
Special Communications Management Unit, etc. He can't take that risk. All that we're asking really is that Sweden come, and if they really want to question him, why don't they just go question him at the embassy in London? They don't have an answer to that.
Let's talk about the future of WikiLeaks, because obviously there's a lot of legal issues here, and some of our community are really interested about what's going to happen to WikiLeaks next, Malika.
Exactly. There's also a question in our Hangout along those lines. I'd like to go to Mohammed Hamesh. Mohammed, go ahead.
Unmute yourself, Mohammed. There you go. You unmute yourself. We see you, but we don't hear you, and not all of us read lips.
It's not working. Okay.
There you go.
It's on now.
Yes.
Okay.
Start from the beginning.
Okay, Julian, thank you so much for taking our questions. At the beginning, when you came on, you said that one of WikiLeaks' missions is actually to show how countries like the U.S. say one thing and act in another way. So what do you think a perfect state could be like, that we would no longer need something like WikiLeaks? Is it a myth? Can it exist, or we will always need some organization like WikiLeaks to exist in order to uncover such huge states that are so complicated and doing certain things that the public could never hear about?
Yeah. There are not perfect states in practice, of course, any more than there are perfect human beings, and human beings make up states. However, there are idealizations of states, or aspects of states, that provide a direction. Just like the direction north is an idealization of a direction, you cannot ever go precisely north. You always go a little bit off. And so if we try and think to ourselves, what gets us to a state that is more just, towards a state that is more just? If we look back in time, we can see that the printing press and speech and all these things, ways of people communicating with each other, learning from their mistakes, learning from the past, learning from each other's experience, finding out when one actor in the community is acting badly and taking appropriate action. These are the things that lead towards a state of justice. We're never going to get to some nirvana. However, we get closer and closer. Additionally, the act of struggle itself is good for people. It is good for human beings. It is good for social relationships to be involved in that act of struggle towards a society or a state or an international regime that is more just.
Right, Julian, that's a perfect way to just pause for now, because we're going to go into the post-show, and there are so many more questions for you. Also want to ask you about running for the Australian Senate. What is it like living in the Ecuadorian embassy for almost a year, and so much more? Give us a little taster of what's to come from our community.
We'll also talk to Natalie in our Hangout, who will ask questions. She'll be talking to us from Australia, and lots of tweets.
So on Monday's program, married at 10 years old and a mother by the time she turns 13, with 1 in 3 girls in developing countries forced into this reality. Is it even possible to end the widespread practice of child marriage? That's the discussion from Monday. But right now, the post show is next at stream.aljazeera.com with Julian Assange. We will see you online. Hello again, this is the Stream's online post show. We're talking to the Wikileaks founder Julian Assange. Also joining us is his lawyer Michael Ratner from the Centre for Constitutional Rights. Let's get right back to the conversation. Julian, I don't know how you managed to do it, but you're running for the Australian Senate. How is that possible?
Well, it's a fascinating position. First of all, it is possible because of the support of the Australian people. We have 3 opinion polls now over the past year and a half that show that between 25 to 28% of the Australian people, all across that time period, intend to vote for me in the September Australian election. But if we break that down a bit, we can see that the support is equal city to country. We have a full 40% support of people under the age of 30, 36% support in the most populous state of New South Wales, where Sydney is located. So something is happening that's very interesting in the Australian community. Now, it's not just because I'm an Australian. Of course, people can see that I'm in a difficult position. The Australian government has been really quite reprehensible in the way it has not supported the Wikileaks organisation, which is an Australian export success story. It seems to be that Australia is a new country. As a federation of states, it is only just over 100 years old. It was, along with New Zealand, the first country to give women the vote. Why is that? Well, it's not because it's a particularly un-chauvinist country. Rather, it doesn't have these class structures, complex class structures that you see in Europe or very old countries.
All right, so Julian, you know what time it is right now in Perth, Australia, don't you? It's the middle of the morning or the middle of the night, depending on which way you go round. So Natalie is waiting. She woke up early or she stayed up late. Natalie, what's your question for Julian Assange?
Yeah. Hi, Julian. It's 4 o'clock in the morning in Perth, Western Australia. You're entering into a very interesting political landscape with the Wikileaks party, and you are getting quite a lot of support. But there are a few things that we're hearing from the ground. That basically is that there's a bit of conflict in between Wikileaks and platforms such as the Pirate Party and also the Green Senator Scott Ludlam. And I guess the question is basically the differences between what the Wikileaks party is proposing and what the Pirate Party and also what Senator Scott Ludlam has been doing in the Australian Senate.
Well, Scott Ludlam has really shown a lot of support for WikiLeaks and for me personally. He's a personal friend, so no criticism and all praise to Mr. Ludlam. WikiLeaks is the values and principles that WikiLeaks has applied in its fight over the last 6 years with corruption around the world, with human rights abuses around the world, with war in different countries. Our fight in relation to the crackdown against us by the Pentagon shows that we know how to handle and understand the interior of bureaucracies, that we will not be cowed by bureaucracies. There is a proof that my values, which I have led this organization with, have been successful in practice and unbendable despite very fierce wind. And so that's a reason why I think the Australian public is happy. I mean, we all sort of know that once people get into the ALP and get into Canberra, that 2 sort of forces start to predate on them. On the one hand, it's the property developers. On the other hand, the US Embassy. And a lot of people in the ALP succumb to that. We've exposed a lot of them. And for people in the Libs, in the coalition, it tends to be big business co-opting them in one way or another.
Right,
but
Julian, we're
if
going to
WikiLeaks,
Sorry, finish your sentence. Sorry, Julian. We just want to move on from domestic
co-opted
Australian
by
politics.
our fight with the Pentagon, well, a few property developers and bureaucrats in Canberra aren't going to pose much of a threat.
Malika.
I think we should shift gears now because our community has lots of questions that they want to ask you, and so I need to get them all in if I can. Nestle Han on Twitter, Julian, she writes in, if you had to do it all over again, would you do anything differently considering the consequences? But before you answer that, have a listen to this video comment with another question.
Daniel Stuckey of Motherboard here. My question for Julian, if you had to choose, which has been your favorite leak and or which do you believe has done the most amount of good?
Julian, back to back. Go ahead.
Well, that's a very interesting question. I mean, I can't really choose between them all. Somewhere between the US diplomatic cables and our Plus D release, I suppose, for the widest impact. But then the Iraq war logs also document the history of that nation over 6 years. 109,000 people killed, nearly 200,000 casualties in minute detail, geographic incidents, and so on.
And speaking of the Iraq war logs, what are we seeing behind you? Is that from Baghdad?
What you are seeing behind me is Baghdad 2007, the famous collateral murder video that WikiLeaks released. It's the footage of an Apache helicopter gunship that we published that killed, that attack killed between a dozen and 20 people, including 2 Reuters journalists, extensively covered up by the United States government and by the Washington Post. One of whose reporters, Finkel, had access to it but did not reveal it. That is alleged to have been provided to us by Bradley Manning, and he has been charged for it and is one of the charges that he will face come Monday.
Julian, I was just getting ready for this show this morning. I was leaving the house, I was listening to public radio, and there was a trailer for a movie called We Still Secrets, the story of WikiLeaks. I just want to play a little clip of it. I know you haven't had a chance to see it, but you've definitely read the transcript. Have a listen to this.
It's a really isolating act. It's a courageous and phenomenal thing to do, but you are essentially doing something that your colleagues and your friends would not want you to do, would not understand. It alienates you further from them. A source who needs to talk to someone and explain what they've done and think through what they've done needs someone safe to do that too. In the logs, Manning says he couldn't talk to WikiLeaks. That's not how they work. Does that protect whistleblowers, or does it protect WikiLeaks?
So this is one of 2 other documentaries that are also coming out this year. So you're obviously a fascinating subject, and WikiLeaks is as well. What are they not getting right in the portrayal of you? Is there something that you want to push back on in the last sort of minute of our program?
Well, I don't know where to begin with that documentary. I mean, that's $2.5 million that Universal gave to the US documentary maker Alex Gibney, the person you just had on speaking as one of our rivals or opponents at The Guardian, who has been sort of writing slanderous opinion pieces for over 2.5 years. It seems to be almost his primary occupation these days is riding off our coattails with criticism. But you can go to wikileaks.org/img in capitals /html/gibney-transcript.html or Google for the same.
Right.
And you can see a large analysis of that. I mean, what is spoken about there, and it shows the datedness of that film. This is let's understand where this is coming from. So the attack is WikiLeaks doesn't meet its sources in bars,
right,
put its arms around them, etc. Therefore doesn't give them some sort of conversational support. That's the claim, right? Why is that claim being made? Very, very simple. This is someone working for a regular old-fashioned newspaper. They're rivalrous with us for the attention of sources. So it's an attempt to kind of denigrate WikiLeaks because they're scared of our publishing ability to pull sources towards them.
Okay.
Of course,
Julian, that's where we're going to leave it for now because we're literally out of time.
In fact, in Bradley Manning's testimony to the court, he says just the opposite. He says that, in fact, that he was communicating with people from WikiLeaks every day.
All right, Julian Assange, We've had so much time with you and it's never been enough. We appreciate you speaking to us from the Ecuadorian embassy where you're currently under asylum conditions there. Also to your attorney, Michael Ratner, to all of our community and all of our Google Plus Hangout. Thank you for being part of this conversation. On the next AJ stream, is it possible to end child marriage? In developing countries, 1 in 3 young girls are forced into marriage. Send us your ideas on that and we will continue the discussion online. Thanks for watching.